We have Kevin Jameson with Avineon, and he's going to be talking to us today about Next Gen 911 and their addressing tools. Kevin, take it away, bro.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Matt. I mean, for all of you who are here to see Wendy Peloquin, all I can say is I'm sorry. It's like showing up for Taylor Swift and getting the drunk guy in the bar trying to get through a Luke Bryan song. So I'll do my best. So I'm going to touch a little bit on Next Gen 911, touch a little bit on the requirements, a little bit on Geocom. We're at this point, we're all kind of veterans of this. So I'll dust over it briefly. Then we'll talk about some use cases with our addressing tools and some success stories. And the ones in particular that I really want to get through, I see some familiar faces in the crowd. So I appreciate y'all being here. So a little overview of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to introduce everything a little bit, talk a little bit about what Next Gen 911 is and why it's important. Again, we all know that at this point. I'm going to go through a few use cases, in particular, the town of Canton here in North Carolina and Alamance County in the city of Burlington. And then I'm going to play a couple of videos that demo our addressing tools that and set up for some questions afterwards. So we are or were Highland Mapping. Kent Rothrock, Brandon Saunders, and myself came over to Avineon through a purchase in 2022. Our team's still together. The cool thing about Avineon is we've got some insanely good support from our business manager, of course, y'all who know Wendy, our project managers. We've all been where you are. We've all touched the editing, touched the data. So anyone you talk to with us is going to understand you and be able to help you in any way you need. So really briefly, what is Next Gen 911? It's an initiative to enhance emergency number services at PSAPs, allowing for transmission and reception of voice information and data information. So to boil all of this down, pretty much, we're going from E911, which was a table-based system, into a Next Gen 911 system, which is based on geolocation. And the traffic that goes to the PSAPs now is routed via GIS as opposed to a bunch of lookup tables being joined together and data being transmitted to the PSAPs that way. So number one, it's a huge leap forward, jumping from landline data that's being transmitted to a PSAP to going to cell phones, VoIP, and mobile devices. And I'm proud to say, as Darren Smith so aptly demonstrated in the first session, not only did North Carolina get ahead with parcels a decade or two ago, we're now, in my opinion, leading the way with Next Gen 911. So yay for the home team. So very briefly, an Avineon is basically an emergency services cloud. So what happens when you submit data to Data Hub via Geocom is that Geocom pretty much does a quality control check on the data. And once the data is deemed I3 compliant, which is acceptable for Next Gen standards, it's onboarded to AT&T and used for routing calls. I3 compliance, as the slide says, is just a functional and interface standard for Next Gen 911. Again, it's something we've all heard 1,000 times over at this point in the state. So I'm confident that everyone in here is familiar with it. GIS data standards for Next Gen 911, I look at it as being in two parts. So number one, you get the alley to RCL match, which is basically a big geocode. So you take the former alley tables that you get from communications, which I understand now is kind of centrally managed. It geocodes to the road center lines. And once you achieve a 98% match with that alley to RCL geocode, you're on the way to being home free. The The GIS data is another separate component to that, and AT&T expects that you have geometry free of critical errors as well as attributes free of critical errors. And for most of us, you're looking at things like overlapping boundaries with emergency service boundaries. You're looking at missing attributes in critical fields that need to get filled in and corrected. Some tips that I would give you for being sure that your data is ready if you're still working toward that goal is just to make sure that naming's consistent across the board with your alley, your road center lines, and your address points. Make sure that's clean. If you don't have MSAG communities on your road center lines and address points, make that a priority because that is a big component of how AT&T routes the calls. Add any missing address ranges to center lines and missing house numbers to the address points, because if you leave those fields blank, that's definitely a critical error. And finally, like all of us geo geeks do, like clean that geometry. Make sure that roads are snapped, make sure that your boundaries are contiguous. And most importantly, if you have service boundaries for fire law and EMS, make sure those outer boundaries align with your provisioning boundary. So at a minimum, for the next gen 911 GIS data, you want to submit road center lines, site structure address points, a PSAP boundary, emergency services boundary for fire law and EMS, and finally provisioning boundaries. And just kind of something that's not in this slide, you want to make sure that your provisioning boundaries kind of like your inbounds cookie cutter area for your county. And then everything else needs to align with or fit inside the provisioning boundary. Other data that's strongly recommended, you can see on this slide. It's not required, but it would be nice to have. It's better to have more than less, most definitely, because as opposed to parcel mapping, which we use for taxation and revenue, this saves lives. So you want to make sure that it's as complete as humanly possible. So again, here's a little fact sheet that is provided by ERISA. If you need to know more about this, here are a couple of links to ERISA's page and some of their recommendation for prepping your data. It's good stuff, and I highly recommend grabbing that sheet and taking a look at it. Oh yes, and we have to mention the ERISA Virtual LEAP Conference that's going to be held February 27th through 29th next year. Definitely take a look at that. So let's talk about us. NG911 in North Carolina. As you all know, AT&T is our EZNet provider. Geocom, very simply, is the QC provider for AT&T. They're kind of like the gatekeeper that makes sure that the alley and the GIS data is compliant. And as you all know, they bounce it back to you. I don't want to say with hate mail, but with just a little gentle nudge to fix it if something's not right. Data Hub's an amazing application. For my North Carolina projects, I even use the Data Hub application for my QC. So that if any of you have ever contracted with us to clean road center line and address point data, I'm using Data Hub to clean that to make sure that when you get that data back, that you get what they want and not what we think they want. So I talked to Geocom before this presentation and asked if there was anything that they would like for me to pass along to y'all. Avineon's very fortunate to have a really good working relationship with Geocom. And Jessica Bierman at Geocom asked if I wouldn't mind passing along that they are in the process of migrating to GIS Data Hub version 2, as Darren alluded to earlier, over the next couple of months. And I put some virtual training dates for the migration and what they wanted to train you on the new version for on the slide. So I'll give everyone a minute or two to take note of that, and please reach out to them and sign up for these seminars. I'm going to do it myself, and it's going to be very beneficial going forward. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some case studies with our next gen 911 tools. I'm actually going to do 3 because I think they're all relevant and they're all important. So we're going to talk about, first of all, the town of Canton, North Carolina, who are, for those of you all not familiar with Buncombe County, they're Buncombe's neighbors just to the west over the Haywood County line. I'm going to talk about Alamance County, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about Ashe County as well. So town of Canton. Haywood County was having some trouble getting over the I3 threshold with their data. And as it turns out, the town of Canton was the culprit overall. And the reason the town of Canton was the culprit was that back in the late 90s, when E911 addressing was being adopted, when Haywood County went to E911 addressing, the town of Canton opted out. So for instance, they had a mile stretch, and Newfound Road is on the screen, but they had a mile stretch of road at least. And, you know, in my analysis, it basically actually went from the center of town all the way to I-40, where they essentially sequentially assigned address numbers to houses all the way up the road. There was no measurement, no standard whatsoever. And this was one of the cleaner areas. Canton was so jacked up that when an emergency service call came into certain areas, they would have a first responder meet the fire truck or the ambulance at the intersection of the road so that they could be led to the person who needed them. So we were contracted as Highland Mapping to clean that up. And with the support of a very brave board at the town of Canton, we were able to rearrange the road center lines to reflect 5.28 feet between address, so that Haywood's dispatchers had the math they needed and that was consistent with the rest of the county. And after we did that, we actually readdressed every needed structure within the town. And as you can imagine, that was quite the political bombshell at first, but as the citizens realized that they were getting help, and even more important in our economy, that they were getting their Amazon deliveries, they were real quick to accept the fact that this was a good thing. This project was done completely with our 911 addressing tools inside of ArcGIS Pro. So the second case that I'm going to talk about is Ashe County, North Carolina. I talk about them, first of all, because they are one of the first clients, and Ken, if not the first, now to be completely on ArcGIS Pro for both addressing and parcels. They're also on Enterprise as well for editing. So Ashe was my first cleanup project when I came to Highland Mapping. We standardized all of the namings, all of the MSAG communities between alley and address points and road center lines. We actually leveraged Data Hub for all of the QC. So basically daily, I would have my time set aside for Ashe. I would do my cleaning on all of their data, submit to Data Hub, and then the next morning, thanks to Geocom, I would know where to pick up and go on with the QC. Inevitably, we got them I3 compliant. They accepted the model that we used, which was a NENA compliant next gen 911 data model that was supplemented with fields that they used for their CAD system that were proprietary to them. And they started editing in Pro with our next gen 911 tools. And this inevitably led to them using our Parcel Fabric tools and going full Enterprise and Pro with their whole operation. Alamance County is probably the most interesting project that I've worked on at my time at Avineon so far. So we were approached to help Alamance County and the city of Burlington with a collaborative effort with their addressing. And so Marlena Isley from Alamance County's here, and she can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but initially you were editing two different data sets and having to combine those. Okay, so for those, Marlena is not on mic, but what she was saying is that they were all editing direct connections back to the same data set. And for those of you with IT departments who are strict, like mine was when I was at Jackson County, and thankfully so, because they kept us from getting hacked, direct connections back to SQL Server can be an issue. So what we did with Alamance and Burlington was go full pro and go through the enterprise with the editing. So what we ended up doing was migrating their address points and center lines to a next-gen 911 compliant data set. We branch versioned those feature classes out of the database and hosted them through the enterprise portal. So what ended up happening was Alamance County assigned the city of Burlington logins to their portal and gave them access to edit the data. So now via ArcGIS Pro and our addressing tools that dock inside of Pro, both entities are editing the same data set at the same time, and they're all current with the edits. So there's no skipping steps, no issues with the data going back and forth. It just is. And that's really the power of enterprise. So as you can see from the diagram, both jurisdictions hitting portal, feeding back to Alamance County's data servers, and it's a done deal. Enterprise is an amazing tool, and if you don't have it and have the means to do it, I highly recommend looking into it and utilizing it. These are our address tools, and I'm particularly proud of these things because I was very fortunate to have been in Highland Mapping just about the time that we started beta testing them, and they've actually gotten more consistent as we've joined with Avineon. But I'm going to show you some demos that show you how these things work. These are all inside Pro. They can leverage a file geodatabase for data storage. They can leverage SDE through direct connections. And as I was talking about with Alamance and Burlington, they can also connect through enterprise and utilize feature services to edit. So I'm going to first play a video on how to add an address point with the tools. Ignore the narrator. His voice grates on me. Click Create to open up the Create Features pane. Choose Site Structure Address Points. Then left-click the location of the new structure. Click Finish. Then choose Select to deactivate the Create Features tool. Select the new structure location and the road off of which it will be addressed. Click the Address tool and use the crosshairs to specify the location of the driveway. Click OK to write to attributes. The new house number, all road naming elements, and all specified fields are filled out automatically. Select the structure point and the center line off of which it will be addressed. Next, click the Calculate Manual Address tool button. In the dialog box, you will notice the name of the road at the top off of which it will be addressed. Manually input the new house number and click OK. Like the automatic address tool, all naming elements and specified fields will be populated. It's that easy. And so basically, Yeah, my loud mouth. So basically what's happening with the tool, you have, as you saw through the videos, you have the option of specifying a driveway location, addressing perpendicularly to the road, or assigning a manual address. All three methods will utilize a combination of drilling overlays and also pulling attributes off of the road center lines to populate your critical fields. It also populates the unique IDs, county, city, country, everything that's required. So it kind of takes the guesswork and the trouble and the stress out of prepping a submission for Data Hub. This will also do the road center lines through interactive ranging tools. If you've used the Highland mapping tools for ArcGIS Desktop, very similar, but there are panes in there that let you adjust ranges, prepare the unique IDs, everything you need to basically edit a center line and have it in a format that's acceptable to next gen 911. And we're running pretty close to time, so I'm going to skip the road center line demo. And if any of y'all have any interest in seeing that, please reach out to either Kent or Wendy Peloquin, and we can set up a demo, and I'm happy to show you anything you want to see with it.